Hello everyone and welcome to Life Begins at 20. My name is Mark and today we have the Colorless creatures section of the cube, which is going to be including the Eldrazi creatures that we have, vehicles and also artifact creatures as well that are in my cube. Now this is all part of the massive 300 plus card update that I've made to my cube, and it's playing so much better, and that's all thanks to the suggestions that have been made by yourselves in the previous videos. And I'm very glad as well for all of the comments that you've made in this series of videos, including on the updates, because there's so many good cards and suggestions that have been made to me. So again, thank you so much for that. And without any further ado, let's get stuck in. So to start off, we were going to go with the vehicles here, and yeah, everybody knows Smuggler's Copter again banned in standard, and to be honest, I'd say a good reason for, just because, you know, it was in pretty much every single deck, but it has performed so well in cube. The Looter Scooter is just fantastic. I mean, 2 cost, it's only got a crew 1, so any token can crew it. Flying 3/3, whenever it attacks or blocks, you can draw a card and then discard a card. You know, you can just keep doing that, and that's a really useful ability to have in a cube to go through and find, you know, your biggest threats there. Next up, we've got Heart of Karan. Again, this was a huge card in standard for the, you know, the vehicle Mardu vehicles deck. It was just doing so much good work, and to be honest, it does so much good work in cube as well. 2 cost, it's a 4/4 flying and vigilance vehicle. It's got a crew of 3. So again, not too badly costed. Plus, one of the good things about it is that, you know, you can remove a loyalty counter from a Planeswalker rather than pay its crew cost, and then just be swinging in with that as well. So again, there are going to be some Planeswalkers which you don't mind playing their, you know, their plus cost. It still means they can be able to defend themselves, and using Heart of Karan there to, you know, swing in for an extra bit of damage is just great to have. Next up, we've got Aethersphere Harvester, and to be honest, I've actually been quite impressed with this card. So for 3 cost there, it's a 3/5 flyer with crew of 1, so again, a token can crew it, not an issue. When it enters the battlefield, you get 2 energy counters. You can pay 1 energy and it gains lifelink until the end of turn, so it just gives you an extra little bit of you know, a bit of gain on top there. But a 3/5 flyer that you can pay, you know, you can just use a creature token to be able to crew is fantastic. Next up, we've got Cultivator's Caravan. Again, this is a foil. We're just going to try and show that off there. This one I quite like because it's, you know, it's got a little bit of extra versatility going on here. So for 3 cost, it's a 5/5 vehicle. You can just tap it to add 1 mana of any colour to your mana pool, so it's got a bit of mana rock use there as well. Or you can pay, you know, 3 powers worth of creatures to crew 3 to swing in there with a 5/5 on top. So again, the versatility of that is what I quite like. Plus, you know, I can't have enough mana rocks in a 7/20 cube. Next up, we've got another 4 here in the form of Fleetwheel Cruiser. Again, I really do like how good that looks in foil there. So 4 cost here, it's a 5/3 with trample and haste. When it enters the battlefield, it becomes an artifact creature until the end of turn, so you can swing in straight away with it as well, which is a huge plus. And a crew of 2 isn't going to cost you too much to be able to crew it as well, and just having the trample on top is really nice to have there. And then last up, we have Sky Sovereign Console Flagship. So for 5 there, we've got a 6/5 flyer. Whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, you get a free lightning bolt. Deals 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls. And crew of 3 again isn't too difficult to be able to achieve there for a flying 6/5 on top. I quite really do like that. So moving on to the colourless creatures here, again, I do not have the older Ulamog or the older Kozilek or Emrakul, just because they're a little bit out of my price range. I would love to get hold of the new Ulamog as well, because I think that'll still do a pretty decent job, but this is what we've got in this section so far. So we're going to start off with, we've got Thought-Knot Seer, so it's 3 in a colourless. Again, I do actually have wastes within my basic land pool for my cube. That's just how I end up doing it. So for 3 in a colourless, you've got yourself a 4/4. When it enters the battlefield, target opponent reveals his or her hand. You can choose a non-land card from it and exile that card. And whenever this then leaves the battlefield, target opponent then draws a card. So again, this could be fairly well good card there to flicker, just to be able to get rid of cards from their hand. Yes, it means when it disappears, they get to draw a card, but potentially you can get rid of a huge threat, and they may end up getting a land out of it. So it's a risk worth willing to take there. Next up we've got Reality Smasher, so for 4 and a colourless there, you've got a 5/5 with Trample and Haste, and whenever it becomes a target of a spell an opponent controls, counter that spell unless its controller discards a card. So it just means, you know, they're going to have to give up some card advantage there, unless obviously they're playing a graveyard heavy deck, just to be able to target this with any spell. So that's fairly useful to have on its own, and a 5/5 Trample Haste body on top. Next up we've got Kozilek's Channeler, so for 5 cost you've got a 4/4 body there, and it's just extra mana ramp, so you can tap it for 2 colourless mana, or you've got yourself a 4/4 body to swing in for there. Next up, Conduit of Ruin, so 6 cost, you've got yourself a 5/5. Whenever you cast it, you then may search your library for a colourless creature card with converted mana cost 7 or greater, reveal it, then shuffle your library and put that card on top of it. The first creature spell you cast each turn costs 2 less. So as much as its casting trigger is fantastic, which, you know, don't get me wrong, it really is, to be able to get some of the bigger Eldrazi creatures out there, or, you know, I think even the artifact creatures then also be able to counters that. The fact that, you know, if your first creature spell each turn costs 2 less is actually a huge benefit, especially if you're going for like that mid-range to trying to get some big creatures out there as well, or even, you know, in a ramp deck as well. So that's, again, a very, very handy card to have there. Next up we've got Artisan of Kozilek. So for 9 mana there, you've got yourself a 10/9. Whenever you cast it, you may return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So that is a fantastic casting trigger to have there. Plus it's got Annihilator too, so whenever a creature attacks, defending player sacrifices 2 permanents, and, you know, keeping this up and being able to attack with it quite regularly is just going to be able to do some significant work to the opponent's board. And it's just a perfect thing in there to, you know, reanimation target. Not necessarily then, because obviously you won't get the casting trigger off of it, but the Annihilator is still fantastic there, or just on the top end of a super ramp deck. Next up we've got Desolation Twin, so for 10 mana it's a 10/10, but whenever you get to cast it, you get to put a 10/10 colourless Eldrazi creature token onto the battlefield, so really you're getting 20/20s worth of, you know, damage there and power there off of 2 bodies for 10 mana, and that is fantastic. Again, perfect for a top end of a super ramp deck there. Next up we've got Kozilek the Great Distortion. Again, I don't have the older version of it. I would love to have the older version of it, but this was the best that I could do at the time. I opened this up in an Oath of the Gatewatch booster pack a while back. So for 8 and 2 colourless mana, you got yourself a 12/12. Whenever you cast it, if you have fewer than 7 cards in the hand, you get to draw cards equal to the difference. It's also then got Menace, plus then you can discard a card with converted mana cost X to counter target spell with converted mana cost X. So there's a little bit of help being used there. Yes, it's probably more beneficial to be able to cast him, but at the same time, a 12/12 with Menace as a reanimation target isn't actually awful. Plus that discard ability, it can be quite useful as well. Next up, again, I've got the newer version here with Emrakul the Promised End. 13 mana for a 13/13. It costs 1 less to cast for each card type among cards in your graveyard, so it was perfect again in Delirium decks back in Standard, and to be perfectly honest, within Cube it may end up being able to be cast for quite considerably less as well. And then when you get to cast it, you gain control of target opponent during that player's next turn. After that turn, that player takes an extra turn, so it just means that you get to potentially screw up an opponent's next turn and just, you know, make plays that they really, really wouldn't want to be doing. Plus, it's also getting flying, trample, and protection from instants. So again, even though you may not get the casting trigger, it's still potentially going to be useful as a reanimation target, or you know, a sneak attack target, or, you know, show and tell target, or anything along those lines. This is still going to be very useful for that. And then last of all, we've got Endless One here, so it's X cost there. Enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it, so it's just going to be as big as you could potentially need it to be, and that's what's so great about it. And I like having the versatility for that. I would love for it to have trample on top. I think that's the only thing that is stopping it being great. And yes, if I get Illamog, this is going out straight away. If I get hold of any of the older Eldrazi as well, it's again going to go straight out. But again, if you've got any other suggestions for me, let me know in the comment section below. So moving on into the artifact creatures themselves, we're going to start off with Signal Pest, which is absolutely fantastic. For 1 cost, it's a 0/1, but it's got Battle Cry on there. So it just means whenever this creature attacks, each other attacking creature gets +1/+0, and I love having little anthem effects like that. It also then can't be blocked except by creatures with flying or reach, so that's really nice to have. Again, it's not actually a flyer itself, but it does do some significant work with that anthem effect. Plus, until fairly recently, I didn't actually realise that this part of the card here is actually his head. I actually didn't realise that. So again, I'm going to be thankful for whoever pointed that out on Twitter. That's actually, you know, I always thought this part of the creature card there was his head, but it's actually there. Next up, we've got Bowmat Courier. Again, this probably should end up being in the red section. Purely down to the fact that it's a 1/1 haste for 1, which again is quite nice to have for an aggressive style deck there. Whenever it attacks, you get to exile the top card of your library face down. And this is the point in time where I'm going to go, yeah, I probably should have put this in red. Pay 1 red, discard your hand, sacrifice this, and put all the cards exiled with Bowmat Courier into their owner's hands. That is a fantastic play, but even as a 1/1 with haste for 1, that isn't too bad by itself. Next up, we've got Hope of Ghirapur. So this is a new card there from Aether Revolt that I've been trying out, and it's done a fairly decent job for me so far. So for 1 cost, it's a flying 1/1. You get to then sacrifice it until your next turn. Target player who has dealt combat damage by Hope of Ghirapur this turn can't cast non-creature spells. So there are definitely some great plays to be able to do with this. Say, for example, you manage to swing in for that 1 bit of damage. You can then stop your opponents countering any of the spells. You're able to do in your end step, for example. You'll also then be able to, you know, stop them from playing any ramping spells, for example, or anything along those lines during their turn as well. So again, there are going to be some very good uses to have for this card. Moving on into the 2-drops now, and Scrap Heap Scroungers the first up. Again, this probably should be in black, purely down to the fact that, you know, it's a 3/2 for 2. But it can't block, not going to be an issue with that for an aggressive card there. And pay 1 and a black, exile another creature card from your graveyard and return it from your graveyard to the battlefield. So the recursion is really, really nice to have, but again, it probably should be in black, and I will be making changes to do that. Next up, we've got Perilous Myr. So it's a 2 cost, it's a 1/1. Whenever it's put into the graveyard from the battlefield, it deals 2 damage to target creature or player. Perfect for just, you know, chucking Skull Clamp on, dealing 2 damage. Or it just means that you're going to be able to swing in with it and your opponent's going to have to think twice about blocking it as well, just because you're getting the extra damage there. Next up, we've got Phyrexian Revoker. So it's a new card that I've managed to pick up quite recently. So it's a 2 cost for a 2/1. Enters the battlefield, name non-land card. Activated abilities or sources with the chosen name can't be activated. The difference is here that it doesn't mean you can also sort out mana ones as far as I'm aware anyway. Again, let me know in the comment section if I've got that wrong, and apologies if I have done, but it's just another Pithing Needle effect there, and I really do like that about it. And again, I can't wait for the card that's been spoiled in Alaxan, which has also got a Pithing Needle effect as well. Next up, we've got Hedron Crawler. So for 2 cost, you've got yourself a 0/1 mana rock there, adding a colourless mana to your mana pool. Again, with the colourless creatures that I've got, it may end up being useful being able to get hold of that. Plus, again, I like having mana rocks, and having that on a creature as well can be quite useful, even if it is, you know, slightly more prone to removal. Next up, we've got Ticking Gnomes. So for 3 cost here, you've got yourself a 3/3. It's got Echo, and you have to pay 3 for the Echo cost. You sacrifice it. Ticking Gnomes deals 1 damage to target creature or player. That isn't necessarily fantastic, but at the same time, you know, you can be swinging in. If you've got extra mana, fine, great, you can be doing some extra damage there. Great as a blocker to be able to do that there, plus you get to then sacrifice it on top to deal 1 damage to target creature or player. Can actually be proving to be quite useful, but at the same time, you know, there's probably better things out there for sure. Next up, we've got Foundry Inspector. So for 3 costs, you've got to throw off a 3/2, and artifact spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Again, fantastic in the sense that, you know, you can be able to get some of your mana rocks out quite cheaper, or any of the artifact spells that we've got for creatures here can go out quite cheaper as well. I used to have Chief of the Foundry. To be perfectly honest, Ticking Gnomes might end up going out to be able to put it back in again, but Foundry Inspector does prove itself to be quite valuable. Next up, we've got Shimmermere. So 3 cost, it's a flash 2/2, and you may cast artifact spells as though they had flash. So again, there may well be some, you know, pretty good uses for this as well. So flashing in another blocker, for example. You know, you can even flash in, I've just forgotten the blooming name of it, Perilous Myr. That's the one. So imagine flashing in Perilous Myr, blocking off a creature, it dying and dealing 2 damage to your opponent at the same time. There are other plays, obviously, that can prove to be very, very useful. And, you know, you can flash in Solemn Simulacrum, for example, to get that into the battlefield trigger on top. But this has proved its worth to be fairly useful. I really do need to actually support artifacts better than I am actually doing, and that's something that I really want to be able to do in the future. So again, if you've got suggestions for me, I'd love to hear them in the comment section below. Next up, we've got Scrap Trawler. So it's, again, you've got a 3/2 here for 3. Whenever it or another artifact you control is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, return it to your hand. Target artifact card in your graveyard with a lesser converted mana cost. So, say for example, Sundering Titan ends up going into your graveyard. You can pretty much get any artifact card back, especially in my cube anyway, back from the graveyard. That's just a fantastic play to be able to do. Next up, we've got one of probably my favourite cards from Kaladesh, in the sense that I love the artwork for it, and it's just got some great abilities here. So you've got yourself a 2/2 blocker for 3 costs there. Enters the battlefield, you gain 2 life, and whenever it dies, you get to draw a card. So again, if you can end up using Scrap Trawler to your advantage there, of, say a 4-cost artifact going to the graveyard, get Filigree Familiar back, getting then your enter the battlefield trigger again, having that blocker, getting yourself a card draw, it just proves itself to be very, very valuable. Next up, we've got a card that I've added in for, having a bit of fun when the drafting scenario comes along, in the form of Cogwork Librarian. So 4 cost itself as a 3/3, but you draft it face up. As you draft the card, you may draft an additional card from that booster pack. If you do, put it back into the booster pack. So, that can be quite handy, in the sense that, you can get yourself an additional card there, put it back later on, so someone then ends to get left with this as the last card. So I do like being able to have, fun little plays like that within the drafting scenario. Next up, we've got Crystalline Crawler. So for 4 mana, you've got yourself a 1/1. It's got Converge there, so it enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter for each colour of mana spent to cast it. Now, again, it's going to be probably a bit better off in a commander deck which has got a lot of different colours, or potentially in like a multicolour cube, for example. But more often than not, this will end up coming in as a 3/3, potentially sometimes comes in as a 4/4 as well, if you manage to get hold of a Signet, or you've got some other mana ramp that can give for any different colour. You can then either remove a +1/+1 counter from it to add 1 mana of any colour to your mana pool, so that again is quite useful. You can just kill it off to get a load of ramp really, really quickly, or you can then tap it to put a +1/+1 counter on it, and it just means it's going to be scaling up over the course of the game. So if you end up need to get loads more mana come through, great, fantastic, you've got the option to do that. Or, it's become a big, body to be able to beat down with later on in the game if needs be. Next up, we've got Mindless Automaton. So for 4 mana again, you've got yourself a 0/0, but it enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. You can pay 1, discard a card to put another 1 on it. So again, you can fuel your graveyard up if needs be using this. You can then remove 2 +1/+1 counters on it to draw a card. So you've got a little bit of an engine there. So, discard cards from your hand that you don't really like, that aren't doing very much for you, and then you can then remove those +1/+1 counters to then draw cards for you, so you've got a little bit of an engine there. Next up, we've got Solemn Simulacrum. So you've got yourself 4 cost is a 2/2, enter the battlefield, search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped to shuffle your library, and then when it dies, get to draw a card. So again, it's like Filigree Familiar in the sense that it's got great enter the battlefield triggers. It's also then got, really useful triggers whenever it dies as well, and it's just a nice target to be able to get back again with Scrap Trawler if you've got a bigger artifact that ends up dying, and you can just keep recurring it back and back and back, and that's always useful to have. Next up, we've got Juggernaut. So for 4 mana, you've got yourself a 5/3. It attacks each turn if able, and it can't be blocked by walls. So there are some cards, obviously, within the cube that are walls. So again, that does help if someone's trying to be a little bit defensive in that respect. But, it just means you've got yourself a 5 power beater going on every single turn that your opponent's going to have to deal with. Not necessarily the best card going on in my cube for sure, but it does do a decent job. Next up, we've got Precursor Golem. So for 5 mana, you've got yourself a 3/3. When it enters the battlefield, you also get 2 other 3/3 Golem artifact creature tokens. There are obviously going to be other cards within the cube like Blade Splicer, which means you get a little bit extra out of those golems as well. And whenever a player casts an instant or sorcery spell that targets only a single golem, that spell is then copied for each other golem that spell could target. Each copy targets a different one of those golems, so it can be quite useful in the sense that you can use a pump spell on one of the golems and it goes on all of them, which is fantastic. But at the same time, as far as I'm aware, if removal was end up using on one of the golems, it ends up wiping out a load, and that's the kind of the issue you're going to have there. Purely down to the fact that you're paying 5 mana and getting 9 power over 3 creatures is what's going to be going on. So it's a little bit of a trade-off there, but it can work out to your advantage. Next up, we've got Psychosis Crawler. So for 5 mana, we've got a creature's power and toughness is equal to the number of cards in your hand. Okay, that can be quite useful depending on, and can become quite big depending on how early you can get this out in the game, plus how much card draw you've got. And whenever you draw a card, each opponent loses a life. So it's just a way of, there's plenty of draw spells, especially in blue and black. So mainly blue, but this will work quite nicely in a blue and black style deck there. You just, properly knocking your opponent down in health and just draining them away. And that in itself is a reason why this is in the cube. Next up, we've got Exomonstrosity. Again, this could probably find itself a different card coming in for this, but there are ways to obviously get this to become a 10/10. So for 5 mana, you're getting yourself a 10/10 with 5 -1/-1 counters on it. With the newer sets, there are ways of getting rid of -1/-1 counters, and I could potentially look into that if I really wanted to, but just to be able to support this card a little bit better, I don't really see the point of doing that. But if you can actually pay white, blue, black, red and green, you can remove those 5 -1/-1 counters from it, and then target player draws 3 cards as well. So the advantage of being able to do that is very, very high if you can actually pull it off, and you then it becomes a 10/10 as well. So it is possible if you can get... you can get this early on in a draft, and then being able to sort out your mana ramping as you're going through the rest of the draft to be able to pull this off. Great, fantastic, good for you. But again, there probably are better things out there that could replace that. Next up, we've got Soul of New Phrexia. So it's a 6/6 for 6 with Trample. You can pay 5 permanents you control, getting indestructible until the end of turn, or you can pay 5, exile it from your graveyard. Permanents you control, getting indestructible at the end of turn. So you've got a bit of a Selfless Spirit kind of thing going on here, but in the sense that you've got to pay 5 mana for it, which is, fairly high, but later on in the game when you're actually going to be having this out, it can become a very, very handy ability to have, and just becoming indestructible, especially if you've got a go-wise strategy and putting this into the graveyard quite early. Next up, we've got Duplicant. So for 6 mana, it's a 2/4, but it's got Imprint as well. So whenever it enters the battlefield, you may exile target non-token creature. As long as a card exiled with Duplicant is a creature card, Duplicant has the power and toughness and creature types of the last creature card exiled with it, and it's also still a shapeshifter. So, you can exile some massive great creature that you can get cheat on for a lot less. And that is really why it's on here. I do like having shapeshifters in the cube. I've got a fair few of them in my blue spells, but this just means this opens it up to a lot of other colours as well. Next up, we've got Scuttling Doom Engine. So it's a 6/6 for 6, and it can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less, which is perfect against token strategies. And whenever it dies, it deals 6 damage to target opponent. So it means that your opponent's going to have to think twice about 1, blocking it, or 2, how it's going to block it. And if it does manage to kill it off, that's going to be some significant damage going to the opponent's face. Next up, we've got Steel Hellkite. So we've got ourselves a 5/5 flyer for 6. You can pay 2, and it gets +1/+0 until the end of turn. So you can pump that up as many times as you want. Or you can pay X, and you can destroy each non-land permanent converted mana cost X, where whose controller was dealt combat damage by this in this turn. Activate this ability only once each turn. So you can swing in for some significant damage in the air if your opponent can't block it. Getting rid of each non-land permanent with, say, converted mana cost 3 or less. 3 is just going to wipe away a lot of your board, and you get to choose, depending on how much mana you've obviously got as well, you get to choose one of the biggest threats on your opponent's boards and get rid of them. So I do like that about that. Next up, we've got Myr Battlefield, and everybody likes the giant artifact ball. Perfect again as a tinker target, as a reanimation target, also a show or tell target, something along those lines. So it's a 4/7 for 7, enters the battlefield, you get to put 4 1/1 colourless Myr artifact creature tokens onto the battlefield. Again, quite happy to abuse that into the battlefield trigger as well. Whenever it attacks, you may tap X untapped Myr as you control. It gets +X/+0 until the end of turn and deals X damage to defending players. So you're just really utilising those Myr creature tokens to deal damage straight to the face, and just making sure that they don't get killed off in combat. So I do like that about it. Plus it means you've also got blockers if needs be, if you want to keep a couple of them open up. Next up, again, a perfect reanimation target, tinker target, and so on in Sundering Titan. 8 cost, 7/10, comes into play. Choose a land of each basic land type, then destroy those lands. And whenever it leaves the play, you get to do that again. And that can prove to be ridiculously good, in the sense that you put that in, you then put your opponent behind as a reanimation target. You put your opponent behind, and you've got an uphill struggle then for them to try and recapture part of this game. And I really do like that card. It's just done some so much good work, and I'm so glad to put the Titan, completed the Titan cycle within my cube. Next up, we've got Metalwork Colossus. So for 11, it's a 10/10. It costs X less to cast, where X is the total converted mana cost of other non-creature artifacts you control. Fine. That can be, that can become fairly useful. Sacrifice 2 artifacts, and it's got a bit of recursion going on there at the same time. Again, that can be quite handy in certain circumstances within the cube. Plus, to be perfectly honest, I don't have a problem having this as a tinker target or something along those lines. Yes, it can just be blocked by a 1/1 each turn, but there are obviously ways to be able to give things trample within the cube, make them unblockable, something along those lines. And a 10/10 body on the board that potentially has recursion as well can provide to be a big threat. Next up, we've got Hangabout Walker. I love this card in Origins. It's just proved to do so much good value work here. So for X and X, it enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. So again, 2 mana per +1/+1 counter. Whenever it dies, you get to put a 1/1 Colorless stop to artifact creature token with flying onto the battlefield for each +1/+1 counter you have on it. So again, later on, if you've got loads of mana, fantastic. You're going to get yourself a lot of value out of this card, especially when it dies. Or you can pay 1 and tap it to put a +1/+1 counter on it if you've got nothing else to do. And you can just keep bring it up and up and up and up and up, and it can get out of control. I really do like that. And last of all, Walking Ballista from Aether Revolt has just proved to be such a great card, and I'm so pleased to have got hold of a copy. I just remember when it first came out and people started using these in the Pro Tour, and the card's cost just got completely out of control. I think at one point in time over in the UK it was like 15 quid a card, which is absolutely mental. It's naturally it's gone down a little bit now, but it's still a fantastic card. So again, 2x, enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. So again, 2 mana per +1/+1 counter. You can pay 4 to put a +1/+1 counter on it. So again, later on down the line, if you've got a lot of excess mana, you can just constantly push it into this to make it bigger and bigger and bigger. You can then remove a +1/+1 counter from it, and it deals 1 damage to target creature or player. So there are lots of uses for this. It's a piece of removal, taking off a +1/+1 counter to, you can ping an opponent's creatures and you kill some of them in that way. Or later on down the line, for example, if it gets big enough, say it becomes a 4/4, this is threatening 8 damage on that turn. And that's something your opponent really has to deal with, and it just scales over and over and over as the turns keep going on, and it can become absolutely monstrous. And that's something I really do like about this card. It really has proved its worth, and if you haven't got one, I would definitely recommend trying it out. So there we have all of the colourless creatures, vehicles and artifact creatures that we have within my cube. Like I said, there's going to be a few cards in here, to be honest, that could well be upgraded very easily, and there's going to be a lot of suggestions, I'm guessing, in the comment section as well below, because to be perfectly honest, this section hasn't improved all that much. I'd like to have been able to get a hold of a few more bits and pieces for sure. I mean, the new Eldrazi's are not quite as good as the original ones of Emrakul, Ulamog and Kozilek. Definitely the old Kozilek is one that I'm trying to get my hands on anyway. I'm going to be going through a proxying process for sure, just to try and get hold of some of these older cards, because it will definitely help out. But like I said, if you have any suggestions for me below, put them in the comment sections below. There's also going to be part of a massive playlist, if you haven't seen already, with all of the other sections of my cube, including all the multicolored sections and the main colors so far. We've got artifacts left to come tomorrow, and then also we're going to have the land section as well, which is going to be coming out on the Saturday. So again, thank you so much for all the comments and suggestions that you've made to me so far, and if you have any more for me, please feel free to put them in the comment section below. I would just like to take this moment to thank my Patreons of the channel. I can't thank you enough for the help and support that you're giving me. If you'd like to do the same, head over to patreon.com/lifebegins@20, and there'll be a link in the description below for that as well, where there are plenty of rewards to choose from. With your support, we can really push to make this channel even better. Be sure to check out our sponsor, 5colorcombo.com, for a great range of Magic the Gathering accessories with stunning artwork, plus a great app to draft and create decks on the fly. Use the referral code LifeBegins@20 for 5% off. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button for new videos every Tuesday and Friday. With your support, we can really help this channel to grow. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.